Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking here as a resident of Darlington for the last 26 years. But the reason I've been a resident is I've been a consultant at Darlington Memorial throughout that time. I'm also Professor of Cardiovascular Medicine at Durham University. And over that 20 or more years, I've had a range of clinical managerial roles. So I've sat on a number of regional and national committees, including the Royal College of Physicians' Future Hospitals Commission, which was published in 2013, which is a way of looking at how services were delivered. So I believe I have a degree of credibility in this area. One area I'm not an expert in, I have to say, is obstetrics and paediatrics, so that's not an area that I'll be discussing particularly today. As I'm getting increasingly long in the tooth, I'm moving from a provider to a consumer of healthcare, so fundamentally it's about my hospital. Now, the reason I wanted to come along today is that when you go onto the website and when you listen to the presentations, there's a sort of momentum that says there's a clinical consensus about these changes. And I have to say to you that that's why I'm here, to challenge that message that there's a clinical consensus. Can I tell you how that was achieved? We were all invited to Sedgefield Racecourse for half a day. It started in the morning with various presentations. We were told we were not allowed to ask questions. We were not allowed as clinicians to challenge any of those presentations. We had to go into workshops. We then had to feed back via people who were on each of the tables, who were part of the STP group. And the questions that we were asked to address were very broad ones. They were about, do you support the move into community care, keeping people out of hospital? Should hospitals be 7-day working? Things of that sort. Motherhood and apple pie. You couldn't possibly disagree with any of that. And that's something that we would all support. But the inference is, and therefore we support the extrapolation to go down to 2 acute hospital sites. And there is no consensus whatsoever. Now, our concern, particularly, and it's come through with other bodies, is that it's all predicated on an assumption that so much work can move out of the hospitals and be supported in the community that actually you won't need the same hospital footprint. There's a particular body called the Clinical Senate, which is a group of experienced clinicians who were asked to give an independent review of this process. Now, I sit on the Northern Senate. It was a bit contentious, so they asked the Yorkshire Senate to actually review this. I'm not here as a senator, no togas today. So what the Senate actually said was, and I would say from my point of view, damned with faint praise is how I would describe it. They said, we support the principle. We all support the principle. What they said is they hadn't factored in the travelling issues, they hadn't factored in the infrastructure, the actual buildings. The Friarage wasn't even on their map as far as they were concerned, and fundamentally they were sceptical about the ability to move work out of the hospitals, and actually said, unless you've done that and can show that it has worked, you will not be able to reduce your hospital footprint. So I think the Clinical Senate, although it is reported as being supportive, is far from that. Now, I bump into people, the feedback that I get, and I know people at North Tees and James Cook who are far from happy. But what I decided to do was to email colleagues within my department, the Department of Medicine, within A&E, within critical care at Darlington. I've had over 40 replies. I've yet to get a reply from anyone who was supportive of this proposal. Every single one of the clinicians that's fed back to me opposes what's suggested. Now, some might say, well, that's because they're worried about their jobs. They're worried that they may end up having to move to North Tees. Actually, that's not the issue for us. In fact, if you look at the map, and you said, where are you going to put 2 A&E departments? You're not going to put the 2 of them side by side next to the mouth of the river, are you? It would make no sense at all. So actually, that's not our concern. The concern of the clinicians was that you could not deliver a safe clinical service from 2 acute sites. So if I take back a stage, I was clinical director of medicine when we merged the departments of medicine at Darlington and Bishop Auckland. The issue at Bishop Auckland was very different. Of the patients who get admitted to hospital, a minority of them are critically ill on arrival, and another proportion become critically ill after hospitalisation. So in order to develop and provide a safe clinical service, you need robust clinical critical care. The issue at Bishop Auckland was that critical care was far from safe. And you ended up with a situation where you would say, if someone was ill in that particular hospital, they were in the wrong place. And that's why the services had to be moved. And there was indeed a clinical consensus that that was the only way to go. If you extrapolate that to the Friarage Hospital, I'm sorry to say that's exactly the debate that's going on there at present. They're looking at withdrawing tiers of critical care support. And I have to say to you, I do not see the Friarage Hospital continuing to manage acute intake in the near future. That will then have an additional backwash, which means work will come increasingly towards Darlington as a result. So I actually know a lot of the people involved with the STP. I've worked with them, and I think they're actually all good people, they're bright people. And there's a lot of what they've produced which we could all agree with. Of course we need to collaborate across the Tees Valley. We need better IT. We want to keep patients at home. We want 7-day working. That's not what we're here for. That's all widely accepted. What they're proposing is they set hospital against hospital, trying to fight for who's going to be the A&E department. And that's not right. From a clinical perspective, our feeling is that patients will travel further, they will travel to under-resourced facilities, and that ultimately the clinical consensus that I receive is that care will deteriorate as a result. So if I take a step back, as far as I'm concerned, the STP group have been working in a bubble, as I think someone said, the sort of groupthink. And actually, we take a step back and you realise, a bit like the Emperor's New Clothes, it makes no sense at all. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to say it's a foolish proposal which we must reject. Thank you.